Hi, I'm Natalie Levy, the founder and lead mentor at She's Independent. I am a sales professional with about 15 years of closing experience. I started my career on Wall Street, moved into growth tech and investing, and I've worked with growth tech organizations for first dollars closed up through about 5 million of ARR. And I have experience with high velocity sales, enterprise selling, and I'm really just here to share a little bit of my strategy and tips and tricks over the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. In terms of what we're going to be talking about, I am going to dive a bit into sales before we actually get into the art of the close. We'll talk a little bit about, how do you think about sales and closing before we then dive into how are you selling and how you should think about selling. Finally, we'll talk about pricing and conversion strategies, how you can learn from no, and how you should think about asking for that business. So a quick note on funnels and activities, because sales is so much more than closing, as I'm sure you all know if you have any experience. But this is just to really illustrate for you that there are many stages to that funnel or deal cycle. I do cover these in other workshops, but I just wanted to give a quick nod because it's really important to understand where are you in your sales process. You can't close too quickly if this prospect or if this potential customer hasn't yet learned the value and isn't near that time to convert. Tech and workflows is another area that I wanted to speak to very briefly because, if it's just you and you're working really hard, it doesn't mean you're going to close a lot of deals. You have to think about working intelligently. There are tech, workflows, automation that allow you to scale your sales processes. And so I just have this slide up to kind of indicate to you, if you're not thinking about how to work intelligently, you're probably really missing a lot of those sales. Okay, so let's dive into the art of the close. First, how are you selling today? Do you have any paying customers? If you've closed deals or if you've even closed trials, unpaid trials, what can you learn from that? And always be thinking about how can you do it better? What can scale, right? What is working? What can you make better? What isn't working? How do you disqualify? It's really important to dive into these concepts before you start asking for the business. Finally, if you're not defining these things, if you don't understand your process, it's not going to scale and you're not going to be able to learn from it. So in terms of pricing, there are many different types of pricing structures we could dig into. The big kind of headline here is, what's the market going to pay? A lot of people say, I'm just going to price it here, but they haven't done the testing and the legwork. So having an evolving strategy or making sure that you're learning, especially if you're new in the business, is a really important piece. And by the way, if you are a closer and if you are not, running the team, if you are not the CEO, you might not be able to ultimately evolve or decide what is the pricing strategy, but you can very much give that input. In terms of, what is closing, it is fine if you end up closing something smaller and you expand it later. You don't want to forget to expand it, but it's much better to get dollars in the door. And it is much easier to close business or grow business if they're already a customer of yours. So it's something you don't want to forget. You also want to make sure that you're digging in and learning, especially if you're early on in your sales process and if it's not repeatable. How can you do better? In terms of conversion strategies, it really depends on what is your market, who is your buyer, what kind of business are you in? So I'm not going to spend too much time digging into B2C because B2B is really my background, but I know enough around B2C at this point to be dangerous given my business that She's Independent. A few thoughts here. If you are B2C, and this could also apply really for either of the categories, but offering a call. So maybe there's, a free trial or a freemium experience, or maybe it's just showing your expertise or connecting with, a technical account manager or a sales engineer, and maybe that drives the conversion. Live demos and webinars, they're great for B2B. You, of course, can do those at scale if we're talking about a webinar, and that can be a great way to get people into your funnel and then start moving them so that they actually knock on your door and they want to buy. Not really, but kind of. Free and paid trials, pilots, again, get dollars closed. Not all deals, especially enterprise deals, can just start as these large scale, deployments. If you're a Microsoft, if you're an Amazon, that's a little bit different maybe. But for a lot of us at startups and growth tech organizations, you have to demonstrate value, and you're going to have to work with them in a trial to really convert and drive adoption and value. Freemium may be a really good opportunity for you as well. You may have to build in those levers and mechanisms so that it doesn't overwhelm your team, but that's something B2B or B2C may make sense. There's a lot of automation these days, right? In terms of maybe there's a live chat or automated support. You don't want to forget about the value you can bring by actually doing things, I don't want to just say manually, but by putting more intelligence behind those conversion strategies. But those are other really great conversion mechanisms that I just wanted to highlight quickly. So if you are a normal person who has not explored this concept, you probably, when you read the word no, tense up, right? You get to a wall, and what do? If you are a great salesperson, you're okay with no, and you're okay with discomfort. But by the way, that's not normal, and you kind of have to build that. And you kind of have to learn, wow, some people have a bad day, or some people are aggressive, right? And you're going to get no. But the best salespeople are the ones that can say, I'm okay with that, and I'm going to roll with this. I'm going to learn from it. I evolve. So disqualification is a thing. If it's bad business, you want to know how to disqualify it. You don't want to drive so hard to convert and then it churns later. But if you hear no, or if you get pushback, that's not a bad thing. I'd say the worst thing you can hear is silence or disengagement. If you hear no, how do we either turn that into a yes, learn from it, or come up with a way, you want us to reach out next quarter, or there was this feature or this thing that we can circle back around. I don't love feature selling, by the way, but I'm just mentioning that, right? If it's really a blocker. So what can you learn from that experience? And make sure that you are following up and evolving. Now, asking for the business is something that I don't know why this isn't covered in Sales 101, and maybe a lot of people don't go through a sales boot camp or course, but so many salespeople don't ask for the business. And if you have any experience with sales, you do know at this point, sales don't come knocking at your door, right? Even if you've done all the legwork, oftentimes they're not saying, hey, invoice me, right? They're waiting for you to ask for the business. So own that sales cycle. What do I mean by that? How do you own the sales cycle? So when I enter an organization as an advisor, or even if I was entering, as a producer, it's what is working? Learn that sales process. I'm not saying that that's definitive, right? You can evolve and make it better, but what can you learn from, and how are those deals closing? And at least that's a really good place to start because it's working. If you don't have deals yet, fine, but map out something and try to convert and learn from that process. So once you get comfortable with, or know, generally, this is the process, and there's a 30 or 60-day trial, how do you think about converting, and how do you think about showing up and driving value and adoption, and really owning and working that relationship so that you can drive and know when to ask for the business. Understand their buying process, right? And I'm sure you've probably heard the acronyms and all the different kind of sales methodology if you've done your digging, but is there a budget? Have they planned for it? What is their cycle, right? Is procurement involved? There's so much you can dig into there. And the more that you know about, and the more you've dug into, is there this critical need? Who's the decision maker? The more you dig into this, the more you can own that process, and they will enjoy working with you because you can truly navigate them through in a very, let's say, much more seamless fashion. There we go. I use the word seamless, from, evaluating through to finding value and then ultimately closing and working with you. Stay close to conversion opportunities. What do I mean? A lot of times salespeople are like, I'm just going to work on this because it's top of mind or it's a new lead. Don't do that, right? Make sure you're prioritizing, spending your time on high value things that matter. For example, if you have some really big deals, I would make sure that you are, taking the time and prioritizing. If you get follow up, or if you can drive conversion on those big deals, that could be worth, 20 times your smaller deals. So make sure that you're not missing the follow up, and make sure that you're giving them enough love. Momentum wins and kills deals, right? So let's just say one of the companies I currently, run fractional sales for, they have a product that's great, but there's a lot of competitors in that field. Okay. So when they're evaluating us, they're almost always evaluating others. So we may have a great demo. They may say they have interest in a trial, but if we don't chase that, if we lose momentum, it's very likely that they're going to go with a competitor. And by the way, even if you don't have kind of a red ocean or a business where there's a lot of competitors, it's so important to keep momentum on those deals. That truly helps drive them, right? Follow up in caps, follow up and chase, send really good, email summaries, concise, informational, remind them, the value, because they're not going to remember all those great things and insights and the ahas that they had on that demo call with you unless you capture it somewhere. And you can reiterate and you can, remind them 3 weeks later when you're checking in, because you've already checked in 2 other times. You can remind them. And because, this was something you really wanted, we want to make sure that this is up and running and offering this value to your team next month. Make sure you reiterate and make sure they know that value. Okay, closing levers. What are you doing to drive that deal to close? And I will tell you, right, levers are so important and so key for this. So I'm going to dive into and just share a few of these. We're not covering everything today, so these are just some insights and thoughts. Proposal and timeline expiries. Don't just throw a proposal out there and say, oh, we'll see when it comes back. But maybe there's I can offer you this pricing. It is good through XYZ date. We can offer you this trial or even a trial extension because you know that they have something they need to do in 45 days, but you have a date, right? Built into that proposal, built into that trial. A POC, proof of concept, or 30-day out clause. Again, if they're really, scared about signing up or being committed, they haven't yet firm budget, but they will in the next month. If needed, I would not want to include this kind of stuff if you don't, but if needed to close, fine. Drive forward with and get that pilot or that proof of concept going. By the way, there are ways to drive higher conversion if you're smart with what that proof of concept looks like. Agreeing in advance. What do they need to move forward to paid or to a bigger 1-year deal, right? Drive value and adoption in the trial and then chase it. Spoke about this a little bit previously, but again, you did all that work. They're in the trial. Now what are you doing? Don't just step back. Make sure that they're finding value and then make sure that you're converting it or working to convert it as the trial comes to a close. Ask for the business. So that's a little bit on this slide. So many things we could talk about. And again, depending on what your business is, you want to think about and get creative. How can you, really drive this deal? How can you get it over that finish line? Some more tips and tricks that follow on that last slide that I just reviewed. I love, digging into things like human psychology and biases and how do people interact, right? How does their mind work? If you haven't read the book, Michael Lewis, The Undoing Theory, or The Undoing Project, excuse me, or the deeper read, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, these are great and a little bit dense, but this is going to just kind of highlight and bring out some of those tips and tricks for you. Anchoring. If you throw out a price, and you are having this negotiation, it is going to pull or anchor to that price you first threw out. Meaning, right, it's okay if you're too high for them. It is going to influence that pricing and it's going to pull to that kind of anchored price point. Similarly, if they throw out a price and it's really, really low, you don't want to anchor to that. So make sure that you can throw that out and really set up a new negotiation, a concept to think about. It's a little bit more about numbers than closing. The awkward pause or silence. You learn so much in spaces with silence. Let me show you what I mean. We'd love to move forward with you, but we are going to need payment by end of next week to give you this price. How awkward is that silence or pause? If I am in a conversation with somebody and I give them that awkward silent treatment, almost always they're going to speak first, unless there's something that needs to fill that gap, or if I've left something out, or if it gets so long, I need to jump in again. You learn so much because people end up speaking because of the discomfort, and they will tell you things. You will learn a lot. Information is good. The give-get. Salespeople are always like, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? Can I lengthen the trial? Don't just say yes. You know what we should do? If we're going to lengthen the trial, or if we're going to give them a discount, what do we get in return? Maybe it's a testimonial. Maybe if we lengthen the trial, it's a risk-free, but we're not actually giving them more free time. The give get is we can do this, but we need this in return. And it basically works every time. The other thing I'll mention here that's actually not on the slide is optionality. So instead of just saying to somebody, here's the 1-year price point, maybe it's here's the 1-year price point and here's the discounted price point, but you need to commit for 3 years or 5 years. Or maybe we give you even a bigger discount if you pay up front for 3 years. Optionality. So basically it makes them feel more comfortable because they're choosing, but ultimately it's things that you've put out there as the salesperson or as the sales team that you want to close for your business. Mirroring. So mirroring is something that's a little bit more about kind of relationship development and how you're communicating. But I am currently wearing, a pretty low-key outfit. We're still kind of in this pandemic environment. I'm about to go take my dog for a walk. If I was speaking to my customers in Asia, I would not be wearing this outfit, or I would wear something over it. I would make sure that I am showing up presentable, formal, professional, right? Maybe this picture behind me isn't going to work for some of my relationships, and that's fine. Know who you're selling into. At one of the companies I work with, we sell in 34 countries today. That's great. It is different in terms of how we address them, how we speak with them. That's an important part of the sales process. Make them feel comfortable and make them understand you are here and you understand how they work and how they need to work. So that's a little bit about the art of the close. I have a few more slides and a few things just to kind of touch on briefly because I love sales and I'm sure you do too. But sales and being a really good seller, it's not just about asking for something or writing a good email. There is truly confidence that goes into how do you show up? And I do have mindset here first because the mindset work is key for being confident in who you are and what you bring, in articulating and asking for things, and having that executive presence. Preparation is huge, right? So making sure if you haven't asked for, a deal this big, or it's your first time closing at that company, take the time, right? Prepare, write down and jot down notes if you need to. That's fine. Practice, you can role play, look in a mirror. You can do it with a friend, you can do it with yourself. And there's so much skill development, that brings you to that level of confidence that you can get after years of selling. Go to the courses, go to the classes, come to our sales boot camp, read some books. Where's your focus? If you want to close deals and you want to close good deals, make sure that whether it's your weekly sales meeting or in terms of, what you're looking at in terms of reports out of your CRM or what the team is focused on, make sure that you have visibility so that your reps so you as a manager know what you should be driving. What are your biggest deals? Do you have a pulse on them, right? Are you asking the right questions in those meetings? Because a lot of times your sales reps will need that guidance and direction or reminder of, here's my list. This is what I'm going to prioritize, or this is what I need to get through for the week. Hold reps or people accountable. So there's a few suggested exercises up here if you want to dig in a little bit more. I'll leave it up for just a minute and mention a little bit more about She's Independent. I started the organization a few years ago, and I'm really excited to promote skill development and mentorship for women identifying in diverse audiences to bridge that gap to leadership. We do have a sales boot camp, which we welcome all audiences, so please join us. And of course, you can get a little bit more mentorship from me there. Check us out at she'sindependent.com. And if you have any questions for me, my name is Natalie Levy, and you can find me at natalie@she'sindependent.com on email, or you can check us out on LinkedIn. Reach out. Would love to hear from you. Thanks.